Отож, вітаємо всіх учасників, всіх, хто сьогодні до нас доєднався. І ми дуже раді вас всіх вітати. І особливо ми сьогодні, власне, вдячні нашому сьогоднішньому гостю за те, що знайшов час поділитися своїм досвідом. Наш сьогоднішній гість – це пан Борис Лорберг, професор дитячої та підліткової психіатрії медичного факультету університету Масачусетса, США. Також він є доктором медичних наук, MBA, і є медичним директором Community Behavioral Health Center в Лоуренсі. І також пан Борис – активний член Академії дитячої та підліткової психіатрії, де він, власне, займається і психофармакологією та різними освітніми програмами. Пане Борисе, вітаємо вас.
Yes, hi, thank you so much for having me here. So I would love to actually learn a little bit about the participants. Could people say just briefly name and where they are in their training, so I can adjust my responses accordingly?
Будь ласка, може хтось хоче представитися.
You can also do it by writing in the chat.
Та я не проти. Хіба скажіть, будь ласка, чи українською, чи англійською, як воно має бути коректніше?
Будь ласка, ви можете говорити українською, буде здійснено переклад.
Супер. Добрий день, мене звати Арсеній, я є студентом Львівського національного медичного університету імені Данила Галицького, студент 5-го курсу. Трошки цікавлюся психіатрією, маю, скажімо так, наслідкові такі моменти, оскільки в сім'ї є лікар-психіатр, то, відповідно, стараюся хоча б трошки бути в курсі новин в галузі психіатрії, з надією на те, що в перспективі буду пов'язаний з цією сферою.
Хто ще би хотів присутнути? Будь ласка, пан Алекс.
Hello, my name is Alex, and I'm a student at Uzhgorod National University. I study clinical psychology, and now I'm taking part in a program from USAID. It is for psychological support for Children's Hospital in Uzhgorod.
And what is the name of the approach or the program?
Psychological support for Children's Hospital. I do not translate correctly, but I can say it in Ukrainian. The name of the project.
Okay. Who are the people on the other side? What is the program that's providing the support?
The people on the other side, you mean our sponsors, or?
Well, you said USAID. Is there any academic institution involved?
There is involved our громадська організація. Я би хотів, щоб це переклали, бо я забув, як це на англійській. Окей, громадська організація «Момент міцності». Vigorous Moment. I forgot the word. Громадська організація.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful.
Чи є ще хтось, хто би хотів представитися?
Так, теж не проти представитись.
Будь ласка.
Hello, my name is Alexander. I am a fourth-year medical student in Lviv Danilo Galitsky Medical University, and I also consider choosing psychiatry as a future career option, and thinking about choosing a specialty.
Great.
Thank you.
Це дуже гарно. Чи є ще хтось, хто би хотів представитись? Якщо ні, то, пане Борис, знаєте, у нас власне є трансляція на YouTube, тому я думаю, що ще багато студентів, медиків, фахівців інших спеціальностей, які роздумують про дитячу психіатрію, будуть мати змогу подивитися, власне, нашу зустріч. Тому так би хотілося, знаєте, поговорити трохи ще більше про дитячу психіатрію і про, зокрема, про ваш шлях у ній. Адже ми знаємо, що дитяча психіатрія це не просто така надзвичайно важлива професія, так? А це фактично справжнє покликання. І зазвичай вибір спеціальності пов'язаний з якимись особистими історіями чи моментами, які залишають слід в нашому житті. То цікаво дізнатися, що стало для вас мотивацією, так? Вашим джерелом натхнення, що ви вирішили стати дитячим психіатром.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. I feel like there are sort of different paths and personalities, and some people are born knowing what they want to do, and other people kind of stumble into it. So I, fortunately or unfortunately, sort of belong to the category of people who have to try things out before they know what they really want to do. So I never thought I was going to be a physician. I never thought I was going to be a psychiatrist, let alone child psychiatrist. However, once I've tried, doing things that I was really interested in, eventually I realized that medicine was an area that where I would have both the most fun and also would be most hopefully would be have the best fit as far as what I had to offer. And so to me the magic formula is to do something that you are most interested in, that also you have the most innate capacity for, and that intersection is what, in my experience, works the best. So when I first started medical studies, I initially was going to become an internal medicine physician, as I did my various rotations in all of the different areas of medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, surgery, psychiatry, I kept feeling that they were very interesting, but something was missing. And so that changed when I did a rotation in child psychiatry on an inpatient child psychiatric unit in a Stony Brook medical school in New York. And what I felt was that the patients I was working with and the staff I was working with were exactly the kind of people I wanted to spend my professional life with. So it was really more of an emotional experience and less of an intellectual sort of discovery. So before I got to choose child psychiatry, I had to decide between internal medicine or ophthalmology and psychiatry, because those are fairly different ways to practice medicine. And the way that choice happened for me was that I realized that I was much more interested in hearing people's stories and focusing on a patient's experience from an emotional perspective, from a meaning-making perspective, and from sort of a larger life story, lens, that I was interested in their specific, values of, hemoglobin or creatinine, which were important, but to me, they were somewhat removed from what it means to be a human being. So that was my sort of first step, is to decide that, you know, I really wanted to spend more time listening to patients and thinking with them about their lives as a whole, than focusing on specific lab values or specific physical issues. And so that's how I ended up exploring psychiatry. Once you know, I was exploring different areas of psychiatry, I realized, and this actually happened later on, that the reason why child psychiatry felt so right for me was that when I was growing up, I both had a need to work through basically, you could say, you know, adolescent angst. You know, when we go through, you know, childhood or adolescence, there are lots of questions that come up, and for some kids, those questions feel more deeply than for others. And so when I was trying to figure out who I was and how to relate to others, I did not really have anybody I could lean on or ask for support. Even though I was surrounded by, you know, loving family, you know, friends, but still it felt like I really did not have enough support for sort of the level of what I was looking for. And so, you know, thinking back, I am now able to provide the kind of support that I was looking for when I was growing up myself, but didn't get to other kids. And I think, to me, that's probably the most sort of significant reason for why I, you know, ended up choosing child psychiatry from an emotional perspective. You know, there are also other, you know, rational reasons, intellectual reasons. So, for example, I really believe in looking for the root of the problem and addressing the, you know, the causes of the problem, and prioritizing that over addressing sort of the symptoms of the problem. And so, to me, if a person is going to have mental health challenges, the earlier we can identify their risk and the challenges, and the earlier we can help them learn to manage them, the more impact we are going to have on their life. So that, to me, that makes a big difference. You know, the other reason from an intellectual perspective is that in general, most societies treat their children and their elderly as sort of the last priority on the list. And I really believe in helping people who are underserved or who do not get the help that they need. So that made, you know, a big difference for me as well. A third reason for child psychiatry, from my perspective, is that it was and still a fairly young field where there's so much that needs to be discovered and understood that maybe has already been studied and understood in medicine or in adult psychiatry, but child psychiatry is really behind in many ways, mostly because of the resources and the sort of, again, the priorities that societies place on children. So to me, it was really exciting to be part of a field that is sort of at its really, you know, childhood sort of stage of development. Like, for example, up until maybe 1990s, child psychiatrists weren't even convinced that childhood depression existed as a phenomenon. So, you know, we are really sort of moving forward very fast. And then perhaps the last reason for why I was really drawn to child psychiatry is that I really believe in working with people in the context of others, so specifically their family, their community, and child psychiatry is sort of, by definition, you have to work with not just the patient, but also everybody else who is around the patient. And so to me, that makes much more sense. It also happens a little bit, it happens to be a little bit more challenging to work with more than just the patient. But I think it's more meaningful. And there's an opportunity to make a greater impact if you are focusing on systems of care, not just the patient. And I guess, you know, a related aspect is that there is a lot of opportunity and need for advocacy. So not just the medical work, but also work at the level of, you know, public policy and systems change. And that's something that is really also draws me in as well. So that's kind of a long answer, but, you know, you asked the question, so, you know, here you go.
Дуже дякую, Борисе. І знаєте, власне, те, що ви говорили, оцей емоційний компонент, який є присутній в дитячій, власне, в роботі дитячого психіатра, це, власне, бажання і потреба докопатися, як ви казали, до кореню проблеми, так? І те, що дитяча психіатрія робить значний внесок на якість життя дитини, так? Це відрізняє дитячу психіатрію від інших професій. І робить її такою, знаєте, багатогранною. А як ви думаєте, чи є ще щось таке, що робить її унікальною, на вашу думку?
Well, there are many things that make this profession unique. You know, for example, you know, when I got to the Child Psychiatry Fellowship, on the first day, all the fellows got large sort of bags of toys. And so where else do you get paid for, you know, sitting on the floor and playing with little kids and having fun? I mean, that's a very unique, you know, aspect. And, you know, I think there is a really significant difference between what you see as the result of your work in child psychiatry versus in adult psychiatry, because you can really see a huge difference since children are, you know, by definition resilient and still changing. You know, their brains are evolving, and even if one does nothing, by virtue of the brain development, the kids are going to get stronger and healthier and better. So to me, it's a profession where there is a much greater opportunity for, you know, joy and positive sort of impact. Although, of course, there is also an opportunity for more intense negative emotional experiences, because when you see kids that are being neglected or abused, that also feels you know, more impactful because of how, I guess, we are, you know, how we relate to children versus adults. What about you, Lisa? What are your thoughts? I'm very curious about your you know, journey and what you find unique and appealing in child psychiatry.
Власне, це така багатогранність цієї роботи, яка передбачає, знаєте, не просто, як ви казали, там про розмова про симптоми, якісь такі дуже речі, можливо, механічні, так, але для мене вона, знаєте, є з одного боку дуже цікавою. І я часто з дітьми говоримо, особливо з меншими, коли ми досліджуємо їхню проблему, з якою вони прийшли, ми кажемо, знаєте, що ми такі трохи детективи, і ми досліджуємо проблему, так? Вона є, власне, такою для мене цікавою і потребує такого залучення дитини і цілої сім'ї, так? І зазвичай це теж не обмежується сім'єю, але і найближчим середовищем – це дитячий садочок, це школа, і це спілкування, комунікація з іншим оточенням дитини теж є дуже важливим. І, власне, така багатокомпонентність цієї роботи, вона, як я вже говорила, з одного боку є цікавою, з другого вона є важливою. Так? І вона, бо ми знаємо, що розлади вони впливають на всі сфери життя дитини. Так? І нам важливо це знати. І це теж, знаєте, теж про що ви говорили, коли ми бачимо, як діти, знаєте, розквітають, як вони зростають, як вони міцніють. Це таке дуже, знаєте, велике натхнення для роботи дитячого психіатра.
Absolutely. You know, I guess the other area that I think is, you know, is pretty unique and makes a big difference is working with parents. And not all parents are open to changing their parenting style, but those who are open, it makes a huge difference both in their life and also in the lives of their children. So in a way, there is this multiplying effect where, you know, you may work with, you know, one parent or two parents, but you're actually impacting many other people, which I guess also applies to children. You may work with one child, but the difference you make for that person is going to multiply and continue, you know, across all the people that child ends up interacting with.
Абсолютно. Та погоджуюся з вами повністю. А також хочу для наших учасників, перед тим, як ми перейдемо до наступних наших питань, хочу нагадати нашим учасникам, що вони можуть ставити запитання в чаті, і наприкінці нашої розмови ми виділимо час для того, щоб відповісти на них. Так що прошу писати в чат, і якщо в нас буде можливість, ми зможемо вживу відповідати, а якщо ні, то ми обов'язково постараємося відповісти на запитання в чаті. Добре. Знаєте, в дитячій психіатрії і в дорослій взагалі, от ми зараз ніби маємо дуже багато інформації, так, про психіатрію, про психічне здоров'я, багато говоримо. Попри те, в суспільстві існує дуже багато ще упереджень, власне, щодо психіатрії, і було би, знаєте, так якось цікаво дізнатися, чи є якісь міфи, з якими вам доводилось стикатися, які стосуються, власне, дитячої психіатрії.
You know, there is a lot of stigma and prejudice connected with mental health in general. It's actually really wonderful to see that it's really changing to the better. So the degree of stigma and the degree of prejudice is actually decreasing almost year to year. But what I found is that kind of a combination of lack of understanding, so ignorance, and also fear that people may have ends up producing expectations that child psychiatrists may either control children, or they may drug them, give them medications that are not safe. Another area of concern for many parents is feeling that they will be not just criticized for their parenting, but also reported to sort of state agencies for bad parenting, and that their children will be taken away from them because of that. So those are the main challenges or myths that I've encountered. But I'm curious, what about you, Lisa? What has your experience been?
Наш досвід говорить те, знаєте, що з одного боку, як ви казали, ще багато є стигми, знаєте, страху піти до дитячого психіатра з одного боку. Але за останні 27 років все-таки я бачу зміни позитивні у цьому. І особисто в моєму досвіді є багато молодих людей, підлітків, які є ініціатором походу до дитячого психіатра, і вони просять батьків, щоб, власне, завести їх на консультації, бо є доступ до інформації, вони читають і вони помічають в себе симптоми, особливо це дуже часто стосується розладу дефіциту уваги з гіперактивністю. І діти, власне, хочуть піти до психіатра, щоб підтвердити або спростувати цей діагноз, і, власне, вони є ініціатором дуже часто тепер походу до дитячого психіатра. Так що це такий наш досвід. Ось, але ви, власне, казали щодо безпеки медикаментів, і так би хотілося трохи, знаєте, цю тему обговорити, бо ми знаємо, що ви 5 років, біля 5 років очолювали групу робочу в Американській академії дитячої підліткової психіатрії, асоціації, так? І, власне, ви займалися тим, що розробляли інформаційні ресурси для лікарів про покази для використання психотропних препаратів дітей. Чи ви би могли розказати, можливо, трохи більше про це, або теж, які ви думаєте, зміни в підходах до лікування можуть бути у дітей з психічними розладами в майбутньому, на вашу думку?
Well, it's a complicated area. So, by virtue of being medical professionals or, physicians, we have to use medications, and we have to understand medications. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to, place all of our trust and faith and hope in medications. So I think it's important to retain a critical sort of perspective when thinking about medications, just as when thinking about any other treatment modalities. So it's interesting the way that the this area of medicine has evolved is fascinating. Only about 100 years ago, at least in the US, anybody could say, I have this magic potion, I'm going to sell it to you, it's going to cure your problem, and go on to make money from selling pretty much anything, whether or not it was safe or effective. And so that was just 100 years ago. So we are in a very different place now. probably still not perfect, but much better place. So one of the areas that I was curious about is this idea of medication being approved. So in the United States, there is a agency called Federal Drug Administration, and it issues an approval for medications, but it's easy to kind of misunderstand what that approval means. What I've discovered is that FDA approval is really more of a legal and a commercial concept, and not a medical or clinical concept. So FDA approval means that a specific medication is approved for marketing and sales across state lines in the United States. So it's a permission to market a medicine and to sell it. It's not an approval or permission to use it in clinical care. So that decision about the use of the medication is solely up to the physician and the patient. So that's one interesting perspective that I think is important and underappreciated. The other aspect is that medications only receive FDA approvals, and if not in the United States, in other countries, there are other regulatory agencies. So this approach is sort of fairly universal. And I'll be curious to know whether approvals by regulatory agencies in other countries has a different sort of format. But at least in the United States, the approval is for a specific medicine, for a specific diagnostic indication, and for a specific age. And so 90% of the medications that we use actually don't have any FDA approval. And it doesn't mean that they're not safe or effective. It may mean many different things. For example, it may mean that a pharmaceutical company did not see any financial sort of rationale for investing resources into following the FDA approval process, which is a very expensive process. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that understanding whether a medication is safe and effective is fairly complicated, and there are really no shortcuts to that. And so what I've been interested in is creating or developing a framework for what are the specific areas that need to be considered when you are making a decision about using a medication. And so those areas include evidence as far as clinical research evidence. It may include regulatory sort of approvals or statements like FDA approval, but they also include clinical practice experience. They include information in the media. They also include, for better or for worse, maybe for worse, the marketing information in the media. I don't know if you have this on TV, but in the US, there are constant advertisements on TV of, you should try this medication, you should try that medication. That's called a direct to consumer advertisement. So there are multiple, aspects to consider. There is also, another aspect that I think is really important, is one's own subjective relationship to medications. So there are some physicians who are really attached to specific medications or to treatment with medication in general. They kind of feel like it's all about medications. And there are other physicians who are the opposite, who, even though they're physicians, they're very anti-medication. And they're like, well, we need to stay away from the medication as much as possible. And of course, there are people in between. And I think it's really important to be aware of one's own conscious and unconscious leaning when making these decisions. Because decisions about medications are not really about the prescriber, they are about the patient. And so we just have to, find a way to integrate all that information and, get the patient to be the final decision maker, from my perspective. So those are some thoughts. I don't know how much they answer your question, and I'm also curious what you think about your question. What's behind your question?
Так, я з вами погоджуюся тут теж про те, що нам, коли ми приймаємо рішення про лікування, нам важливо враховувати не просто симптоми пацієнта, так, а власне індивідуальні потреби дитини і враховувати її, на якому віковому етапі вона є, всі ризики, тобто багато компонентів брати. І мені здається, що тут важливо так дотримуватися того балансу, знаєте, між немедикаментозною терапією і медикаментозною. Що стосується мого досвіду особистого, то я також, крім того, що я є дитячою психіатриною, я є психотерапевткою, і, власне, це мені допомагає, знаєте, інколи прийняти це рішення, бо я знаю, як працює когнітивно-поведінкова терапія при розладах психіки у дітей-підлітків з одного боку, з другого боку, як працюють медикаменти, і це так допомагає мені особисто прийняти це таке, на мою думку, збалансоване рішення щодо лікування. Так, ось. Власне, теж, ви знаєте, Борисе, хотіли дуже дізнатися, бо знаємо, що ви написали книгу з педіатричної психофармакології, і вона, власне, стала таким, знаєте, дуже важливим і корисним ресурсом для дитячих психіатрів. Скажіть, будь ласка, що вас спонукало, власне, її написати?
Well, so there's a book called Strength Finder, and I think you may even be able to download a free PDF online. And the idea is that traditionally we've always, as a society, been focused on the problems and the what's wrong with us and with others. And so, for example, the field of medicine has always been focused on diagnosing the problem and then fixing the problem, or at least doing what can be done. And that's a valid approach, but it underappreciates the role of focusing on the strengths. So this book, Strength Finder, helps people discover what their natural, innate strengths and abilities are, and to focus more on developing those. And there is this understanding, or maybe belief, that when we succeed, we really succeed more because of our strengths and our innate capacities and interests, and less because we found a way to improve our weaknesses or challenges. So to answer your question, what I think I've discovered about myself is that one of my deep-seated interests, maybe a little bit of maybe a passion, is I have very strong sense of curiosity, and I love discovering information and finding ways to kind of synthesize it and to integrate it with other information which kind of makes me, by definition, a kind of a lifelong student. So, so this book was basically an opportunity for me to continue to sort of learn information, but also, you know, I believe that information has to be useful, so to also share it. So that was one of the reasons why I ended up, you know, writing this book. You know, I kind of looked at how information gets presented in general in literature, and I realized that usually there is a focus on just summarizing the studies or the evidence, which is important, but doesn't really give one ready answers for how to apply that information. So just because I read that there was this randomized control trial or that randomized control trial doesn't really help me know what to do with that. So when I realized that was missing, you know, I thought maybe we can, you know, fill in that gap. And so this book is an attempt to take the evidence, then you know, grade it using a classification for quality of evidence and recommendation, you know, grading, and take multiple, you know, aspects of the information into consideration. So, for example, as a result, you know, one would be able to say, for this particular diagnosis or condition, these are the medications available, and this is how well we know, how much we know about them. This is sort of the quality of the evidence that we have. And then based on the potential benefits and potential risks, this is the level of recommendation or suggestion that we might make about either using the medication or not using the medication. So it was kind of looking under the hood of the whole medication decision-making process, and going beyond, you know, is this medication FDA approved or is it not approved? So that was part of the, you know, my motivation. And the other part was I really love to connect with people and both learn about you know, others, and also look for ways to help people come together in a collaboration and you know, work together as a team. And so this book was, you know, a really great opportunity to bring people together, writing the chapters. And so my job was more coming up with the idea for what, you know, how to structure the book, and also you know, finding and engaging with the authors. But you know, most of the book was written by experts in their fields, and my job was more to sort of oversee and edit and kind of push people towards a specific framework. And so it was, you know, a really exciting process, and I got to do what I love to do, which is to learn and to connect with people. So that's sort of a long answer to your question.
То такий гарний, такий цікавий досвід ваш. Але ми сьогодні теж говорили, що робота дитячого психіатра – це також велика робота з батьками, бо це є невід'ємна частина нашої роботи дитячого психіатра. І, знаєте, часто батьки теж мають багато страхів і сумнівів, чи звертатися до дитячого психіатра. То, власне, скажіть, будь ласка, можливо, у вас є який ваш досвід роботи, як працювати з батьками, як, власне, їм допомагати подолати ці переживання і налагоджувати, будувати довіру, власне, до дитячого психіатра?
Yeah, you know, I really believe that for any kind of treatment or healing to happen, there has to be trust and there has to be relationship. And without that, nothing sort of technical can happen. And also, it's a really important part in overall effectiveness of treatment, because when we think about the placebo effect, we usually think about placebo as something that we want to minimize because it confuses the sort of the interpretation of the clinical research. However, from a clinical perspective, placebo effect means that every single medication we use has 20 to 30, maybe even 35%, aspect of both patient's own hope and also the relationship between the patient and the provider. So when we give patients placebo and still see 30% response rate, that means that all of that response came from not the medicine, but from patient's own internal, resilience, hope, and also in patient's trust in the provider. So, building a relationship with the parents and the patient is, to me, is the most important part of the treatment. Maybe not the most, but as important as finding the right or the most optimal treatment. So, in my experience, the reason why parents are reluctant to ask for help or to develop a relationship is because most often it has to do with fear of being criticized, which is very natural. It's impossible to be a perfect parent. It's just not an option. We all, as parents, we all make mistakes. And the only question is, do we learn from them and how do we learn from them? So, being able to have a conversation about it, I think, is important. There are some parents for whom it's difficult to trust because the level of fear is so high that it becomes more about control. So if I give you information about my child or myself, I'm giving up control, and that does not feel safe. And I mean, those parents are less common. It's a minority, and it's more difficult to work with them. But in general, my sense is that if you establish with the parents that you are another human being just like them, and that you're not there to criticize them or to tell them how to do things, you're there to learn from them and to provide support to them. Most of the time, if parents are somewhat, psychologically healthy, they are able to connect. I think it's important to ask everybody, including parents, like what are your concerns? What are your hopes? And to remember to focus on the positives and the strengths. And most of the time, it works wonders. Often parents have specific concerns. Like, for example, one concern is, well, if you give a diagnosis to my child, then my child will be labeled forever with this diagnosis, and they will be, mistreated by their peers, by the school, by their future job. So, it's a valid concern, and one can talk about it and provide some reassurance and also some perspective as to what's going to be more damaging, the risk of being, criticized in the future or labeled in the future, or the risk of not treating a condition that is impairing and definitely is going to, do some damage over the lifetime. Leslie, I'm curious, what about your experience? What do you do when parents come with fears and doubts to you?
Я думаю, найперше для мене це важливо батькам дати знання, так, щоб вони найбільше дізналися про розлад, який є в їхньої дитини. Друге, це так, знаєте, дати то розуміння, так, і самого розладу, і того показати, що як ми розуміємо батьків. Ось, а третій такий важливий компонент – це підтримка. Власне, те, що ви казали, що батьки відчули цю допомогу і бачили, знали, як вони можуть і самі допомогти дитині, так, і що вони можуть отримати від дитячого психіатра, зокрема.
Absolutely.
Так. Я хочу теж звернутися до наших учасників. Можливо, хтось з вас хоче пану Борису поставити питання. Може, хтось вживу хоче.
Я би, будь ласка, хотів, якщо можна.
Будь ласка.
My question is, nowadays there is a popular quote in media, especially saying that do not follow your passion, choose a career where you're good at, and you will get your passion when you achieve something. And my question is, how can I, being fourth-year medical student, how can I find out that psychiatry is for me and the best version of myself is an psychiatrist and not any other specialist? Thank you.
Yeah, no, great question. So the best ways I know to figure this out is, one, to try whatever it is you're thinking about. So if there is a way for you to shadow or work with another child psychiatrist, that would be one. Another way would be to talk to people who are doing what you are thinking about doing. So just like you are doing now, talking to me. And the third piece is, we are not always lucky with knowing what we need to know. And sometimes you just have to pick something and see what happens. And there are plenty of psychiatrists who came to psychiatry after doing, orthopedic surgery or internal medicine. And I'm sure there are plenty of internal medicine physicians who started out as psychiatrists. So, you make the best choice you can with the information you have, and then you move from there. Let's say
Thank you.
Sure.
Пане Борисе, я вам дуже дякую за цю чудову зустріч. Скажіть, будь ласка, ще так наостанок, такий, знаєте, послання для студентів-медиків, які роздумують про вибір професії, або людей, інших спеціальностей, які думають, власне, про дитячу психіатрію. Ваше останнє, знаєте, таке послання для них.
Well, I've already shared many thoughts about it. One more consideration that you may want to keep in mind is that it is relative to most other areas of medicine. Child psychiatry actually has a better lifestyle considerations as far as the hours of work, the level of stress, as long as you're able to manage emotional stress, so that's one piece. And the other piece is that as a child psychiatrist, there are so many things that there's so many different ways to structure your job, which may also be true in other areas of medicine. But I'm really impressed with how much one can do as a child psychiatrist, from seeing patients to doing research to doing policy. So to me, it's a very flexible field. And I guess my message would be, if it feels like this may be for you, then I would definitely pursue it further. But I don't think it's for everybody. And you know, this is the part of the sort of the reflection that one has to do. Personally, you know, I feel like it's the best field there is, but you know, of course, I'm a child psychiatrist, so you really have to figure out what's best for you.
Пане Борис, дуже вам дякуємо за цю чудову зустріч, за те, що поділилися з нами досвідом. Ми теж розуміємо, що ми могли би ще дуже багато про це говорити, і ми сподіваємося, що в нас будуть такі ще можливості з вами. Я дуже дякую вам за ваш час, за те, що знаємо, який ваш навантажений графік, але ви все-таки прийшли з нами, поділилися. Я дякую всім учасникам і до нових зустрічей. Очікуємо.
Thank you so much. Would love to continue.